else in support? Anyone in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Jason Harper, Virginia Cattlemen's Association. We respectfully oppose the delegate's bill. We completely appreciate the angle which he's coming from and certainly look forward to continue supporting economic development opportunities in Southwest Virginia. However, the reintroduction of these elk, the growth of the elk population has been confined by a stakeholder committee recommendation at this point and with the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries cooperation with an elk management zone. The bill language doesn't define a designated area, and it's our feeling at this point, because of the regionalization of this issue, that looking forward to a special permit for taking of elk in areas outside of the elk management zone, which very clearly may not want the elk, would supersede an existing policy that already works where elk can be taken on an existing deer tag. The elk management plan has yet to be adopted by the board of the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. So it's our concern with the significant health issue risks that present to the cattle industry from the inclusion of elk that aren't really indigenous. This is an unprecedented issue in itself, where we have a species that's being reintroduced at the same time trying to figure out how to regulate these animals. Different from indigenous populations of deer, where population assessment is easy. With all of the accuracy for a plan to move forward that relies on reporting of elk that are accurately killed and legally killed, where our concern is that a special permit at this time will actually facilitate poaching or taking of elk that's unreported outside of that elk management zone and be a disincentive to folks who are affected as landowners for damage that elk may cause. So with respectful opposition, we support the concept of moving forward with the elk management plan, but we prefer to see it adopted first by the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries and move forward with the special permit process once the designated area is clearly defined.
On lines 23, there's a fund established for the protection if that becomes agricultural damage, it's called sale. Is that?
Hey, we respect the gentleman's comments, and we have worked very closely with the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries specifically on this bill, and I do believe they have no official position on it, but they are satisfied with the amendments that have been made. And I will say that the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries has been involved in this process of reintroduction of elk from the beginning, and with concern of crop damage and so forth. It's safe to say that deer can damage crop just as easily as an elk can. And if you look at the terrain and the habitat of where the current elk population is in Buchanan County, I made the comment a couple of days ago. In the 10 years that I've served in office, I have never seen more than 10 head of cattle in Buchanan County. And I live in Tazewell County, which is a large agricultural area with a lot of cattle, but there's virtually very few cattle in Buchanan County. And so I think that, and crops as well. And so typically the only crops that you may hear about in some of the coal fields are the ones you're looking for in helicopters. So we are just making every possible effort that we can to diversify the economy. We realize that some good decisions were not made over the past 30 years, and so we're thinking this is a good decision. And I think that it's natural for animals to migrate into other areas, but the research has shown, and at least with this current population of elk, is that they're not leaving Buchanan County. They're staying here.
If you're hunting them, wouldn't that reduce the population?
Questions like this are things that still need to be fleshed out. And in addition to the fund, which is indeterminate at this point whether it would cover any damage or not, there's no issue right now that's been addressed related to whether a landowner who is being affected may not need a special permit to deal with the damage that those animals are causing. There's framework that we believe exists, but we think that the special licensing program is preemptive of finishing the elk management plan to ensure that landowners' interests are protected, and particularly in our industry in cattle production, where there's also a health issue that makes us different. I'll just put it that way.
Questions? Feel like a bomb.
Chairman, I'm not sure I understand. The last time we had this subject discussed, as I recall, we were talking about getting elk back into Virginia. And now we're talking about shooting. The question I have is, it says that you can establish, I guess the commission can establish a quota. And I was wondering about how successful we've been in getting elk back and what kind of quota we're talking about. Hundreds of elk.
Yeah. Tom, you want, whoever you think is the most perfect answer, probably.
Mr. Chairman, Tom Guest, Cave Village Fisheries. Currently, there's about 200 elk in Virginia with about 175 in the containment area. They're calving on average 20 to 30 elk a year, but that's what they see. That's not seeing all of them. There's a guesstimate that there could be as many as 40, 45, but there's about a 30% loss on the calves. They're not really moving out of the containment area, and the department is working to collar some more animals to kind of track where they are. Right now, the majority of them are in that containment area. And really, if I may, what this does is it's permissive for the board to allow them to create a program, not necessarily that they have to. So it would be several years before they'd even consider a hunt, because we're only at that 200 number, and usually you gotta look at having a bigger herd than that before you start a hunt.
That'd be fair.
Mr. Chairman, how many did we originally bring to Virginia?
We brought 75 elk in over a certain period of time, and that was about 6 or 7 years ago, if I remember correctly, and they were held for 90 days by the state veterinarian for health and that type of thing, and they were moved into a containment area and kept there for more observation and testing and that kind of thing before they were allowed to leave.
Is that right?
To me, the key is it says the board may. It doesn't say that this will automatic take place. It just gives you all the authority. Don't you all already have the authority to set this program to this time and things as appropriate?
Mr. Chairman, Deli, right, currently there is no provision to allow the board to set up an elk program specific to elk. They can manage other game as far as license goes, according to the code, but there is no code 6 and no option to create an elk license.
Mr. Chairman. And I echo the gentleman from the Cattle Association comments, and I think I understand your concerns as well, and the whole issue of crop damage, crop mitigation, and so forth. Geographically, and you know, all Commonwealth is so diverse, but when you get into the mountainous terrains where this elk habitat, how can I say this? The elk are happy where they are. They're not migrating out into other areas, and so the habitat where they currently are is, in my opinion, would have very little effect on the agricultural community, because there are no farms, there are no large-scale farms in the coal fields. There are no large-scale cattle operations, and so I think if an elk migrated over into Bland County or Tazewell County, we may run into some issues, but simply all we're asking for today is to start the process and put this back into the board's hands and DGIF to establish a program.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, you're right.
it's time for a motion.
It is.
I'll move the report.
Move to report, second. Second. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please vote on the report. Delegate McQuinn, you'll be, you see here?
Yes.
You'll be next.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Oh, the delegate here, well, she'll be next.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, we're ready. Ready to vote. It was recorded.
Didn't know that came up.
Okay. Bill is reported 5-1. Thank you, Doug. Next, we're going to get back on the cemetery
Okay.
issues. Turning attention to House Bill 2681, Delegate McQuinn.
Mr. Tim, why don't you have a hot seat right here?
We do.
I can't
Okay.
get I gave it to this lady.
No, no,
No, sit down. Sit down.
There we go. Musical chairs. It's all good.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm so tired, I can't see.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Okay, the House Bill 2681 is focusing on historical African American cemeteries and for the city of Hampton. And so it adds 2 cemeteries in Hampton to the list of cemeteries called which are qualified. A qualified organization may receive funds from the Department of Historic Resources for the care of these historical cemeteries that are being identified. They are cemeteries that have been abandoned or unidentified. And now there are organizations and even localities that are stepping in to help provide perpetual care. And so these funds would help to address that. The bill adds this to a list of, add these cemeteries in Hampton to a list of now quite a few that are being restored across the Commonwealth. And the amendment that you have before you is it's a complete list, which took us some time for them to research it and to verify it. They wanted to share that last year, actually, Governor Northam visited one called the Tucker Family Cemetery, which is supposed to be the oldest one to end the Commonwealth, which is going to accept a state of disrepair. Many of these historic cemeteries are in. And so in order to preserve these graves, in a special year, we celebrate 400 year, this year 219, that we wanted this first African that were being brought to our shore, sold to slaves. The city of Hampton wanted to add these cemeteries to the list. And so there are Bassett, Elmerton, Queen, Pleasant, Tucker, Union Street, and Gold Samaritan. And there are a couple of them that only had 15 or 14, 29 graves that have been identified. Okay, and we have some individuals here who will be speaking to it.
You have an amendment?
Yes, sir, Mr.
The
Chairman.
first one I'll be
Okay, the amendment, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And I believe this amendment is not complete. It adds only 2 to bring us up to a total of 4 cemeteries. And I believe we still need to add Elmerton and Tucker.
Okay.
And now,
You have the numbers?
I do not for those, so we might have to do that in full committee.
Okay. Delegate Quinn, I'll be with
Unless
you.
have that.
But our first, Delegate Allen, were you here with Delegate Allen's bill here?
No, no.
But his was amended greatly,
Okay, all right.
by, you go explain what happened.
Mr. Chairman, the state archaeologists working for DHR have been fanning out across the state and surveying these cemeteries as members bringing their bills to me. And in some cases, the numbers are reduced, and in the case of your bill, we have 2 to 4 cemeteries to add. I could, Mr. Chairman, offer the amendment for the 2 cemeteries that I have. They are Good Samaritan Cemetery with 37 graves, and Union Street Cemetery with 125 graves.
Yes.
So moved. All right, second amendment, remember, it's been a long day. Amendment is the thing. Sorry. I don't think, according to Bobby, you don't have to have a vote, do you? You have to have a second. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now, having done that,
I mentioned, if the patron has the numbers for the Elmerton and Tucker family cemetery, we could
I do have those.
have those.
So the Tucker family is 15, and the Emerton was 339. I think they did $5. Where is this?
That's like a motion.
yes, I would like to.
I move that we add the 2 additional cemeteries.
Second. Any discussion? Those are the reports. All right, anyone in the audience, yes, it is.
Yes, we have Devon Cabot.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, Devin Cabot on behalf of the City of Norfolk, and we would just like to thank the delegate and the committee for your consideration. We are uncovering, as time goes on, more and more graves that may qualify for this, and we've been working with the state to identify them and make sure they're proper. We have an organization that has been taking care of the graves since, many of them, since 2011, and the woman is turning 70, and she is having trouble doing it on her own, and we were trying to help her find a way to preserve these historic treasures in a way in perpetuity. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor? Speak to the bill? What's your pleasure? Motion report is second. Next discussion. Hearing none, vote on the board.
Is the motion report amended?
As amended. Report as amended, 6-0, and I guess if there's anything else that pops up between now and the committee, we can amend it.
Okay, that'll be fine. Now, do I need to come to the full committee?
I would suggest it if you have any amendment, if you have any
Okay.
more. If not, you do not,
All
as far
right,
as I'm concerned.
that's Miss Hampton, and I was.
Okay.
Doing a
Would you like to
favor.
go next?
She was doing a favor for me.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So that's nice to hear.
Okay.
A lot of really influential people were once buried there in such a disrespect.
Okay. You report out.
Well, then I should just be quiet.
Your surrogate did really good.
Thank you so much, committee, we appreciate it. All right, y'all have a great evening. All right.
Okay, delegate, what you got? There she is. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee.
Council 2739.
Right, again, this is dealing with African American cemeteries. This would add 6 cemeteries in the city of Alexandria. African American Heritage Park containing 28 graves. Contraband and Freedman Cemetery, 631 graves. The Douglas Cemetery with 83 eligible graves. The Lebanon Union Cemetery has 53 eligible graves. The Methodist Protestant Cemetery with 1,134 graves. And the Kenny Hill Cemetery with 14 eligible graves.
Okay. Any, hey, good. You did good on that. All right, anybody in the audience like to speak in favor or opposition? Come forward, please, take your name.
Mr. Chair, members of the Subcommittee, Sarah Taylor with the City of Alexandria. We're grateful to Delegate Herring for carrying this. The City of Alexandria has a long history of preserving and protecting the historic nature of our community, and a lot of these are cemeteries that actually have fallen into disrepair. The city's taken on the responsibility for preserving and protecting and interpreting, and so we're grateful for the Delegate Herring for carrying this and for the opportunity to access these funds in the future for further maintenance and preservation of these sites. So thank you.
I have one question.
Delegate Wright?
I see that the cemeteries can have qualified organizations receive funds from the Department of Historic Resources. Is there any additional effort to raise money in addition to that to help maintain them?
Now to turn to Sarah.
I mean, we absolutely do in the city. I mean,
Yeah.
the city itself, our Office of Historic Alexandria already maintains, uses city funds to do this. We have private organizations that pitch in as well. And this is just a supplemental. I mean, $5 per grave isn't going to go very far.
I think it's important to know that there is
Absolutely.
additional funds going into it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is absolutely not, the end-all be-all of the funding and the money that we're going to spend on these sites. It's just an additional resource for the city to do the work that we already do.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds ready for motion?
Yeah, I am. Motion report for second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote on the board. Your report 6-0. All right, next, let's see. Doug Hurt? House Bill 1973.
Yes, sir. So, House Bill 1973 continues on the work that this subcommittee committee, Department of Historic Resources, DLS, and other patrons, including delegates McQuinn, Ward, and Herring, have just talked about trying to add qualifying African American cemeteries for additional support from the department. We have been able to verify 2 qualifying cemeteries in Pulaski County. the West Dublin Cemetery with 44 grave sites, and the New River Cemetery with 33 grave sites. One is owned privately by an individual who is struggling with upkeep, and the other is owned by a collection of African American churches in Pulaski County.
Thank you, Judge Hurst. Any questions? Do we have any? Anybody in the audience like to speak in favor of House Bill 1973? Or opposition? Hearing none, let's move.
Second.
Report. Properly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote on the board. Bill reports 5-6 tonight. Yeah. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. And gentlemen.
It's a good deal. That's why I like it.
Great program. Thank
It
you.
is. Delegate Head.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening. Delegate Head has 2250.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there's a substitute. It should be forthcoming.
Adopt substitute, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Substitute properly before us. You want to talk what the substitute does?
Certainly. Well, just to give you the concept of the bill in general, this comes about because from a constituent who had an issue, was hunting on a piece of property, contiguous property, but it crossed over jurisdictional lines. Part of it was in one county, part of it was in another. Those counties had different firearms regulations and inadvertently crossed over from one to the other while he was out hunting and happened to get cited for doing that and never left the property where he was supposed to be doing that. Very difficult to determine where you are. And so the question that was posed to me, why couldn't you have the same regulations for your own piece of property? So the bill, as we initially put forward, we just said that a property owner would be able to decide which regulations would apply if it's crossed jurisdictional lines. The concern that was raised, and it was a very valid one, was what if you have a contiguous piece of property that has, say, 1,000 acres and 999 acres are in one locality and 1 acre is in the other, then you could, without some restrictions, so you could pick the one. So what we did was, working with DGIF, coming up with the idea that whatever the larger parcel is, could be the regulations that would prevail. My understanding is now that very soon that DGIF, the conservation police officers, will be able to have, while they're out in the field, a device with the mapping that will show both property boundaries as well as jurisdictional boundaries, and it would be very easy for them to ascertain which one was the larger parcel on any place. So the enforcement would be very easy on that. And this, again, only applies to that limited number of properties that cross jurisdictional boundaries. So,
Right? Fair? You ask a question?
I just wanted to confirm that this substitute, the original bill is taking out that language around contiguous, right? Am I reading correctly?
right, the substitute, and I'm sorry, let's see, one or more contiguous parcels of land owned by a particular landowner span 2 or more, the firearms ordinances of the locality in which the largest portion of the landowner's property lies shall apply to anyone hunting on any portion of the property. And then they still have to follow, obviously, all of the state hunting regulations as well.
Right, but the line that used to say such property may consist of 2 or more, that's gone, correct?
That's
Yeah, okay, that was my
yeah,
problem
yeah,
with it, okay,
right,
so I want to make
right.
sure.
And
Okay.
so this becomes much more
Yes.
concise,
Okay.
much more clarified.
Thank you.
This involves,
Yes, Delegate Wright.
only private property.
Only private property.
This is interesting.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I thought we addressed this a couple of years ago. Maybe I was wrong.
I don't recall. Tom, would you like to come up and speak?
Mr. Chairman, Tom Guest, we have no position on this bill. Currently, the localities under 15.2 can just make a myriad of local firearms regulations. So you may require a tree stand in one county and rifle in one county and something else in different distances from roads. And if anybody's looked at the hunting regulation guide, that's why there's 87 or 85 different local regulations that people have to figure out which county they're hunting in. So this hasn't been addressed, and what happens, the localities, boards of supervisors, city and town councils make a local ordinance, and then they notify the department by May of each year by letter, and then that way we can get it in our digest and people are able to enforce it.
I can see where it could be problematic.
Mr. Chairman.
No, you're right.
So this would not be statewide, localities would still have the right by ordinance to control.
Mr. Chairman, Dell, you're right, yes, sir. The only difference would be if you had a contiguous parcel of land that crossed a line, then the landowner and then also law enforcement would know that if the majority of the land is in County A instead of County B, they would follow County A instead of the confusion between two counties.
And if both counties had the same ordinances, it'd be a
It's a wash. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, like a fair.
the new information or the new ability for them to look at it, how accurate is that? And will it be obvious which county or which locality that belongs to?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Ferris, it's essentially going to be, the officers have a smartphone, they also have a computer in their vehicle, so it's hooked into the agency's GIS system, so of course in some areas it may not be quite as accurate, but the thought by the command staff would be that the officers being in the local area would be able to, if they have questions, they can speak to the landowner, and verify or that kind of information through the courthouse or however they use it.
Yeah, you're right.
Suppose an individual is hunting, and I know he's the person, he or she is responsible for knowing the law and knowing this, but suppose they aren't sure exactly where the property line is as far as knowing which piece of property is in the largest pieces in which jurisdiction.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Wright, I'm not really sure how to answer that because that's why the delegate head's thought was if you went with the majority of the land in one county to the other, then you wouldn't have to worry about where the county line is as much.
And Mr. Chairman, the thought for coming to that one system, I really appreciate your time working with us on this, was that if you're hunting on property, it's either your property, and so you know what the regulations would be, or you should have permission from the property owner to be there and should find out what which locality regulations are going to apply. And again, this is just to clear up the inadvertent, while you're out hunting, that you've crossed over a municipal line that you didn't, they're not lines that run through the middle of the woods that you can see. It's very easy to accidentally cross over and inadvertently run foul of the law.
It's definitely a national problem. Anyone in the audience like to speak in favor of House Bill 2252? Please come forward. Anyone in opposition?
What happens now? When you read the current law?
Chairman, what was the question? I'm sorry.
What happens now?
So under current law, let's say if you have two counties with different local ordinances, you have to follow whatever is within that county. So if you were in, say, Prince George in one county, whatever the local ordinance is, and that's where half your land is, and the other half would be in Sussex or Dinwiddie, then you would have to follow the county ordinance for whichever parcel you're on, based on your property and which county it lies in or which city.
Which could be very problematic if it could be standing. Give them that city to be a problem.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, as I recall, the incident from this was something along the line of, it was hunting with a rifle was fine in one county, but the county that they crossed over into inadvertently was shotgun only. And they didn't realize they crossed over the line, but they had, but without leaving their own property. We're just trying to clear that up so that you don't run afoul of that and make sure that you know what you're doing. Hunters real good about trying to do the right thing. 99% 99.9% of the time. You gotta, you know, but it's just, sometimes it's hard to do.
Reach it.
Is there any further discussion or committee moves, work, motion?
Good report.
Motion to report, and a second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please vote. And on the, substitute, please vote on the board. Everyone voted who cares about it?
There you go.
There we go, okay. New reports 3 and 2.
Very good. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Hayes, I inadvertently skipped over you, I apologize. On those days. No, I did, I agree. House Bill 2311.
So, Mr. Chairman, substitute.
I move to substitute.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Substitute is before us. Tell us what the substitute does.
Yes, sir. Substitute is to correct, strike line 46 is introduced, strike 13, 15, and insert 468.
Scott, is that,
Yes, sir. It's just alignment on line 46.
okay. All right, everybody understand that?
With the amendment.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And Mr. Board.
All right, Chairman, members of the commission, this is in summary, historical African-American cemeteries in the city of Suffolk. It's going to add Oak Lawn Cemetery in Suffolk, 468 eligible graves to the list of cemeteries for which the qualified organizations may receive funds from the Department of Historic Resources for the care of historical African-American cemeteries and graves.
Anyone in the audience like to speak in favor of House Bill 2311? Anyone in opposition?
Move it. Second.
First report, second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, vote. 5-0, reports. Thank you, Delegate Hayes.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Yeah, there, okay, come on up. Turn your attention to House Bill 2201.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2201. This came at the request of the Department of Forestry. And basically what this bill does, it allows the state forester to hold certain records in confidence, including trade secrets, commercial or financial information supplied by individuals or business entities to the Department of Forestry. It also keeps in confidence reports of criminal violations made to the department by persons outside the department, and the records of active administrative investigations until investigations are closed. Basically, under current law, the state forester does not have any specific authority to withhold certain records in confidence under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act or the Forestry